Hello and welcome. I'm Omar Salem and this is The Product Life. Today we're going to have a classic discussion about product strategy, what it is, and how to apply it. And our guest today is one of I see as the best product experts in the world. He is Adam Thomas, principal at Approaching One. Welcome, Adam, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Omar. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. So, just for people that might not know you, can you give us an introduction about who Adam Thomas is and your background and your experience?
Sure. So, who am I? I am a product person first and foremost. I've been doing product management work for about 15 years now, and that has scaled from a tiny startup where I ran when I was fairly young and not knowing anything about what I was
Mm.
doing to a bunch of different industries. I've worked on mainframes. I've worked in AI. I've worked in small, medium business SaaS products. I've worked in enterprise SaaS, right? And the one common thing between all of them is I have been focused on making impact in a customer focused way. Right now, um, I guess I find myself being a professor at Columbia University, uh, teaching artificial intelligence, as well as a professor at MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art, where I teach product management and product and business, um, as well as running my consulting firm, Approaching One, where I help companies figure out product strategy in different ways, whether that's strategy itself, giving definitions, whether that's metrics, right? How do you measure the strategy that's in front of you? Or communication. How do you communicate that back out to the rest of the business so that people understand what you do and how you do it?
That's amazing. And as I said, this is gonna be focused on product strategy. But since you gave that intro, that there is like one question that is bouncing in my head right now, because one of the things that I always, have a discussion with anyone that I have on the show here is how could people, learn product management, how it could be taught as well. I think that, in the last 15, 20 years, like, there was always this question about how to get into it, how to learn it, and so on. It wasn't really academically taught in schools and universities. It's not something that has like a direct certificate that you have to take, like the PMP with project management, right? But now you said that you're actually teaching this in those universities from different aspects. So, like, how are you finding that experience of academically teaching and product management and putting it in a form of like an actual academic curriculum and an academic research topic?
It's my next big puzzle, to
Ah,
be honest with
okay.
you. The It's pretty difficult to take something that is experiential as product management and turn that into, as you mentioned, right, a syllabus, a way for to just try to tell people how you do the thing that you need to learn by doing.
Hmm.
But a couple of things that I have found useful is, and I think it's helpful to students, is to outline some of the definitions and expectations that you may find in the field.
Hmm.
Product is a bit all over the place, so they need to understand what is a job that they can get into that is going to support their growth. Right? So teaching them what to look for
Hmm.
when applying to those companies, because a lot of people in product end up getting swallowed up from these programs and other places as they come
Yeah.
in. So they go so hard to go find the job, but then once they're in the job, they're out in 2 to 3 months,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they're just wondering what just happened, right? And
Yeah.
so giving them the tools to avoid situations like that giving them some
Mhm.
definitions about what the job is, and then teaching them some of the tools, some of the base tools that they need in order
Mhm.
to do the job pretty well. A lot of what I've learned in my career has come from, it can be taught. It's come from mentors and me going out and doing it. And then also me going out and teaching product teams as I become a product leader in my career. What does it look like to teach people the basics of those concepts? Whether
Mhm.
that's pricing or customer research. I just named two areas that a lot of product managers, frankly, aren't great at today.
Yeah.
And if you are a product manager coming into a team, even if you don't have much experience, if you can talk to a customer or
Mhm.
you can start to get some idea of pricing and understand a balance sheet, you're already ahead of the competition. You can catch up to anything else, but you have some sense of expertise
Yeah.
um, that allows you to be impactful from day one.
Mhm.
So it's a trying to figure out what are some of those skills that we can teach
Mhm.
that gives people impact, and also helping them scout out what jobs will work for them
Mhm.
so that they'll be patient enough to follow through on that.
Okay, that's a very interesting take. But let me take up the one of the last sentences that you said. So, like, you said a couple of the skills of which you can teach, right? So, do you think that there are some other skills that are really needed in product management that cannot really be taught, like it's based on talent or like an interpersonal trait in the person itself? Like, for
My
example,
answer
when
to
I,
this is
yeah.
uh, my answer here for that, like outside of curiosity, I think everything else is teachable.
Mm-hmm. Like for
I can.
example, when I ask you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like when I was asking you this question, I was thinking about something like customer empathy. So how do you teach something that would be like as volatile as this concept of empathy? Like, no.
Um, that's a tough one. Like product, back to where product doesn't isn't great around definitions. There are some places where, if I could be completely honest, empathy is something that holds you back.
Hmm.
Um, if you're in the wrong environment, being
Yeah,
empathetic for the customer can lead you out the door.
yeah,
I think this goes back to, you know, fitting people for the right purpose and the right teams.
hmm,
I don't want that to come off as me saying we just need to find more places for unempathetic people,
uh-huh.
right? Like I think what I want to say is I think for the empathetic folks, for the unempathetic folks, I'd like to get them out of product management. But for the empathetic folks, um, assessing that through the work that they do and how they show up, and then helping them figure out what, um, helping them figure out what they can do to enhance those characteristics in the work that they complete is important. Um,
Hmm.
yes, I prefer high empathy people in product,
Of
and
course.
I look for that empathy, curiosity, um,
Hmm.
uh, a sense of tension.
Yeah.
Right? They have to be okay with conflict. And I'd say they have to seek it, but they have to be comfortable with the idea of
Hmm.
conflict. Right? These things enhance all the other skills that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but this is like a really interesting thing for me. Like, would you say that at least if something cannot be taught, like at least making sure that everyone is aware that this is like a main trait that needs to happen, and maybe help people explore that within themselves somehow, or try to understand it, deal with it. Have some examples on, like, situational examples, like how would that go in that situation, and so on, at least just to make sure that they are aware of these other traits that are not just theoretical, that are not just, could be taught, but also you should be aware about other things. Like, also something else jumps to my head, like being comfortable with ambiguity, for example, or not knowing the right answer, but how to try to explore and experiment in aim to look for an answer, something like that. Like, just making people aware of this, that it exists, should maybe help them to explore that within themselves.
Yeah, and I think when I think about my syllabus and um, some of the assignments and um, presentations that I have them give, right?
Mhm.
I want to highlight those things and
Yeah.
have them really think about it through a lens that I think is a bit more tangible. So for me, a lot of that goes back to problem and customer.
Yeah.
And so um, I really hammer on those two topics because I
Hmm.
think it pulls out that thinking from a person. How much is your customer showing up in your materials and your research, um, in your presentations? How much, likewise with the problem, whatever
Hmm.
problem you're solving, how much does that show up? I find myself also doing this like in the field if I'm running a product team, right? This is something
Hmm.
I continuously harp on. How does the customer uh, show up in the work that you're doing? How does the problem show up in the work that you're doing? And if you
Yeah.
can really tell those, if you can lean on those two things, it'll give me an idea of your empathy. It'll give me an idea of your
Hmm.
curiosity, and it certainly will give me an idea of the tension that you're able to hold because there are going to be a bunch of things in conflict
Yeah.
if you focus on those things, especially as you deal with other folks in the
Hmm.
organization.
Hmm.
I think it's like almost a perfect kind of end to strategy, but like that, because like that's, I mean, that's the work of strategy really is how do
Yeah.
we take these tensions and how do we put them to use in the most
Yeah.
productive way possible to solve a problem.
Yeah. Okay, great. Look, like, that's a really interesting side topic for me, getting know how this could be taught in an academic framework. Like, I would really like love to get a chance to, like, at least take a look on your syllabus structure just to understand how to do something like this. But, like, let's get back to the main topic that we have at hand right now. Yeah, getting into product strategy. So one of the questions that I always try to ask to my guests or colleagues or anyone that I meet really is, how would you define and explain the difference, but also the similarities or the connections between vision, strategy, and a roadmap?
So I get a lot of my thinking from Marty Kagan on this because I think
Yeah,
he has a really good way of structuring
of
that
course. There he
triangle.
is.
There you go, it's right there, the books, right?
Yeah,
The idea of vision being something that you look at from 3 to 5 years out,
yeah,
listening to him talk and write about it.
mhm,
It's the vision of the world, right?
yeah,
And for some reason, before I thought about it, I didn't quite get that
mhm,
connection. But yeah, it's a vision of a new world. And so
mhm,
visions of the new world have to be big. You're changing something,
mhm,
which means everything from it has to change. Everything around it has to change in reaction to that change you're making. Um, and so when it comes to vision,
mhm.
this is something that I messed up with at the beginning of my career.
Okay.
You have to invest a lot into it.
Mhm,
There has to be a material percentage of, I think, your company's revenue that has to be dedicated to building and communicating that vision, that 3 to 5 year outlook.
mhm,
When I had the honor of listening to some of the SVPG partners speak about how they do this work. And one of the things that blew my mind was the amount of investment that they have their customers make into this, right? Pulling off full teams to work on prototypes and visualizations and um, really having offsites, bringing people, flying people in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really investing in what that vision looks like, uh, so that you're able to tell that story. And so that flows down into strategy. And strategy is what that major problem is that is stopping you from getting to that vision. So,
Mm-hmm.
what's the major problem that you can deal with right now that allows you to get to that vision that
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at in 3 to 5 years? Typically, this is a problem that you can solve within 6 to 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
and you get very focused on a what is stopping you from that future. Generally, in a problem context, in a customer focused context, but sometimes it could be other contexts. Like, is it a regulatory context? Is it a technology context? Like, that should be where your energy is shifting, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the context that's most important. And
Mm-hmm.
then your product roadmap is your way as a product team. That's your communication with the strategy, right? I see it in conversation. How do you tell the other people? It's a communication document. How do I tell other people what's important
Yeah.
for us to be, for us to get to where we're going? In the shorter term, the strategy, in the longer term, that vision, right? That, so how do I communicate that through what is on that roadmap? Because the roadmap's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
No roadmap is 100% accurate. And so, like, it's extremely important. There's something I say during some of my talks where I'll ask people in the crowd, okay, you have a roadmap. Raise your hand if it's been accurate, 100% accurate. Raise your hand if it's been 75% accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Raise your hand if it's been 50% accurate, right? Like,
Yeah.
the to use it as an accuracy or precision type tool is not the right way to think about it, because it can't be. But
Yeah.
what it can do is it can send the signal of trust, what you're
Mm-hmm.
learning, what you're building, and how it connects back to strategy, so that when things come out, people can put the product in context with the rest of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the roadmap that helps people see how it plays in context with the strategy, and then you have the strategy to see how what we're doing over a shorter year, 18-month period term plays
Mm-hmm.
in line with this new world, this new vision that we're talking about, that we're going to do in 2 to 5 strategic loops. We will get to this vision, and
Yeah.
that's how that all plays.
I really love how you put it all and connect it all together. And like, well, in my own talks, like when I'm trying to summarize this connection and between these three terms, I like to say that so a vision is the future state, it's the dream state, which inspires a strategy, and then strategy dictates or drives a roadmap. So, like, would you, like, agree to that, or do you think it might be not very accurate?
Yeah, I mean, like, they have to plug and play, right?
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a connection.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the mistakes I see teams make when it comes to, well, the first big mistake is teams don't connect any of this,
Wow.
right? Everything
Hmm.
becomes very reactive.
Yeah.
I'm going and talking to these stakeholders. The hippo, the highest paid person in the room says X. We got to go and do Y,
Mm.
and that gets reflected in our roadmaps, right? Maybe that
Yeah.
person goes a level higher. Some executive says X, Y, and Z, or some middle manager, and then that becomes our strategy. And then
Hmm.
uh, some executive just goes AI, for example, and then that
Oh,
becomes our
yeah.
vision, right? And
Yeah.
like, AI is not vision. AI is technology.
Yeah.
um, how do you change the world? Like the difference between a reactive and proactive vision, strategy, and roadmap. I see a lot of similarities between the, you know, all three of these objects, especially when it comes to being proactive versus reactive.
Yeah.
Reactive is really looking at things
Hmm.
and being a very prescriptive form of the world. Like we're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Doesn't give you a lot of space to roam. Doesn't give you a lot of space to think. In
Mm.
technology, especially where everything is fluctuating,
Yeah.
versus proactive is a very descriptive way of operating.
Hmm.
And so that description not only gives people an idea of what the environment you'd like to create, what that could be, it also gives people on the front line, blind people, whatever individual contributors, the person on the team,
Hmm.
direction into the decisions that they should make on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And so when it's descriptive and people can see how their work connects,
Hmm.
not only is it going to be more, it's going to flow through that vision, strategy, roadmap that you have.
Yeah.
People, it's also going to be, oddly enough, it's going to be more accurate because people are going to communicate more what's possible and what's not, and that's going to show up.
Hmm. Yeah. I really love how you how you explain this in proactive versus reactive, and how proactive you can be to change the world. Like I haven't heard this kind of, like, distinction before, so it's really unique in how you explain it. So
A lot of pain to come up with this. A
yeah.
lot of, yeah.
I can imagine. I can imagine, the kind of pain that led to that. So yeah, it's good that you're at that stage now. Like, good
Yeah.
for now. Yeah, cool. So, like, these are the general definitions of, ideally what should happen and how should a strategy look like. How does it relate to a vision, and how does a roadmap come to complement and, execute on that. But let's try to be, a little bit more practical now. Now I'm supposed to put together a strategy to reach this vision. And me as a product manager, I have my ideas. I'm trying to validate them. I'm putting them together. I think that this, relates to this. I'm trying to put a strategy together. But I don't live alone in the world. Like, there are stakeholders. There are different teams that I have to collaborate with, different departments, a lot of people here and there, and so on. And they have their own ideas of different strategies. They work on their own functions. Maybe they have some separate strategies trying to go to other ways. So, um, how do we handle all these kind of stakeholder, you know, interests and things that they want to do? And maybe across different functions, you have marketing, you have sales, you have finance, you have operations, you have all of these. And they also think differently about strategy. Maybe they don't really understand strategy. Maybe they understand strategy in a different way. Maybe they understand that this is a roadmap, not a strategy. All of these different things. So the first level is how to make sure that you're trying to align all of these people towards one goal. And the second phase is how to make sure, like, transitioning, since we were talking about Morty Kagan, like, transitioning from the inspired to the empowered level after that. And as an individual contributor, as a PM that is doing the day-to-day job, if you're not empowered enough within this kind of setup and you're trying to figure your way out, like, how do you try to empower yourself and, like, really, like, grab this kind of empowerment for yourself? I'm sorry that this question is very long, and I know it has like 2-3 questions embedded in it, but, like, that's how it came out of my head. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. And I mean, like, always, like, feel like we can do podcasts on all of these, like, separately. But
Yeah.
um, let's tackle one at a time.
Yeah.
So the first one was uh, you're working with stakeholders, right? Like, and
Yeah.
how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
The first thing I often ask product managers when they ask this question is come up to the board and write out what the incentives are for the rest of your stakeholders. What's important to them? And then afterwards, write out how are they paid? Right? How are people on their teams paid? And it blows my mind how often product managers cannot complete that exercise. So
Yeah.
what that exercise, well, it tells me as a coach or workshop facilitator, right, that you're not listening, right, to your question, you're thinking about it all wrong, right? Because if I can't tell you how someone is paid and I can't tell you what's important to them in a moment, how can I ask for alignment from them?
You can't understand their stake. So
Yes, you don't know the stake, right? We're at
yeah,
the core of it all, right?
yeah,
I can't understand why they're doing anything, and so I'm basically coming in the room where asking them for things that may be counter to what they want or what they
mhm,
need, or even how they bring home money to feed their families.
yeah,
Sales is a perfect example of this. I think there's
mhm,
a material amount of product managers who think salespeople get paid the same way they do.
yeah,
Salespeople just get paid every 2 weeks and they go home and right. The reason why they're, scratching and clawing is because they just want to look good. No, 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 no. They get
no,
paid based on what they sell.
yeah,
Yeah, that they get paid on what they sell. So when they come to you and ask for a special, or when they come for that is being driven by a few things, but primarily the main driver is I need to sell something. Right?
mm,
I need to feed my family. I need to
I need
you know
to,
I need
yeah,
I need to pay my bills. Give me something I can sell.
yeah,
The subtext there is I don't feel comfortable, or I don't feel comfortable with what we have. And so the only thing that I have to hear is what people seem to be telling me. And so this is where the special comes from. Even though the special that they ask could be, it's generally when I hear that, I hear features and ideas and stuff that are already in our current product,
yeah,
right? Stuff that they can already do. Um, so that tells me that they don't know. You're on the same team. And that tells me that there's a huge fissure between sales and product,
mhm,
right? It generally is. One thing that the folks at SVPG often recommend, which I think is perfect, right? Uh, they say go out on sales calls with go out product people go out on sales
yeah,
calls, sit on sales calls and just listen and answer questions. You're going to find out a whole bunch of things. You're going to find out what sales enablement needs to look like.
mhm,
You're going to find out what customers, uh, what are some of the things that are being reflected back to your salespeople, right? So you can start to adjust your problems that you're looking to solve.
mhm,
And you can also you can feel your work, right? You can feel what happens after it leaves the safety of the product development team. Start to
yep,
feel how it sits against the rest of the world. How do we often know play on islands? We're not the only game in town. Start hearing that,
mhm,
not from blog posts or pretty graphics that you'll find
yeah,
on the internet, but let's start hearing it in the room. And so you have an idea of what's important to them, and then start talking to salespeople and the sales folks in metrics that they care about. One of the most important metrics that is impactful to salespeople is win rate.
yeah,
How do you frame your conversations around win rate for them? I guarantee you, your stakeholders will be a lot more receptive on the revenue side if you start talking about win rate more. And so
mhm,
when we start talking about alignment, the first thing, right, if it's sales, if it's customer experience or success, right now I'm talking about retention numbers. I'm talking about expansion numbers, right? Your customer
yeah,
success people get paid. They get somewhat of a flat rate, but then they also get paid based on retention numbers. So yeah, when they're coming to you and saying we need to save this customer, is a bit more underneath that than just they're trying to look good for numbers. Again, that goes back to affecting what they bring home, how they pay their bills,
Yeah.
right? So if you're talking about things in numbers of churn, and then also on the positive side, like what is going to lead us to expansion, again, and now your customer success people are far more interested in what you're saying. And so when you start talking about the alignment, giving them the right information to say, okay, I think this product is going to have better, uh, it's going to have better churn numbers, and I think it leads to expansion for these types of customers. Right? Now they're starting to see what your strategy is. They're starting to feel that. Um, so when it comes to stakeholder engagement, I have this presentation I'm working on called the 5 deadly sins of strategy, and one of the deadly sins is called selfishness. Right?
Yeah.
Stakeholder questions often boil back down to selfishness, and so the most important thing before we do anything else when we start thinking about alignment is thinking about the other people in the room. How are they affected by the work that we do? And you, as a product manager, have a unique opportunity to bring that together and tell a really good story. And also, I brought up tension in the past. Right, this is a good place for it. If you give people the right information, they can have the right discussions and the right arguments that lead to the best result.
Yeah.
And so once we get to the best result, everyone wins. This is where the disagree and commit comes into play, and the Amazon stuff and all that good stuff over there, right?
Yeah.
That 6-page memo is designed to give everybody the right information so they are able to have the discussion. And so with product managers and stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, it really boils down to understanding who your stakeholders really are,
Hmm.
building relationships with them, and giving them the right information to make the right decisions. Because if you do that, they can start to trust you. And then that makes everything else much easier.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's very clear here. So once you have that rolling on, and I think, yeah, before this, like, I think what you just explained, specifically with the case about understanding the perspective where, for example, sales teams are coming from, and understanding how do they make their money and how do they make their impact and so on. This is yet another perspective or another angle of something like empathy, right? So it's not just that you're understanding your customer and empathetic with your customer's problem, but in order to be able to like do like actual impactful and active stakeholder management, like you really need to be empathetic with your different stakeholders and understand the kind of value that they drive and where they're coming from, and they're not just um, trying to prove another point, or it's not just a power balance game. Like they really need to do something else because their own dynamic is happening in a different way. And empathy is really important this because like you're trying to combine different departments or different functions across the company, but they operate differently, they have different dynamics, and you need to put all of that together in order to execute your strategy and to be able to make sure that everyone is winning as your strategy is going on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's also a unique angle for this. So then you started having this, and things are looking better, shaping up better right now, but there's still this give and take. And we are all hearing all of these terminologies about being product led or sales led or marketing led or whatever led. Like everyone is trying to lead everything, right? So sometimes it might fall between the cracks that the product teams are not empowered enough. And like our inspiration here again, Marty Kagan, has wrote a whole book on building empowered product teams and how they should work and so on. But like, as someone that is working on the ground, an individual contributor, you don't own an organization, you're not a director or a GPM or something that you could try to push with influence a little bit. How do you start earning your own empowerment within a company that has many different stakeholders that are caring about many different things. Although you try to put everything together, you try to understand everyone, but still, you don't feel that empowered to achieve or to execute on what you want to do. So, how do you start earning that for yourself?
I think empowerment. I think there's a couple things that I think it's always important to highlight with the empowerment conversation. Um, and the term empowered is mostly an aspiration, right?
Hmm.
Like it's not a specific ideal. Like it's not a I wake up not empowered and then I wake up empowered. Right?
Yeah.
Depending on the context of where you are, the definition of empowered changes, and you need to be okay with that change. Um, a small startup. A lot of times when people talk empowered, they want the freewheeling of a startup with the consistency of a big old enterprise, right? Life can't. It doesn't really work that way. So I think as we now that we have that defined as really aspirational, I think the important translation to make uh, with this is that a lot of what you do as a product manager is a reflection of how much trust you have in the organization, and so how much freedom you have. Um, Essentially allows you to operate. And so, how do I get more empowered? Ask yourself, how do I become more trusted? If you're trusted in whatever circle, and this can be any format, right? It could be how Marty Kagan does product. It could be how Eric Rees does product. It could be even in how safe is done, right? Like a lot of people don't like safe, and but it's a reality. If you're able to build trust in the space that you're in amongst your circle of influence as a product manager, right? We talk about ICs, right? The thing that makes an IC product job quite unique, I think, is the fact that you have a very clear circle of influence in whatever you're doing, right? An IC engineer can or cannot have that circle of influence, right? Depending on kind of where they are in the organization, right?
Yeah.
It could be very large, but for the most part, it's confined to them and maybe their partner, their pair, or whatever. Right? As a product manager, you have an outsized level of influence in an organization,
Hmm.
is especially in that world that you operate in. If you have a product, right, you have influence in the sales place, you have influence in the customer success teams, you have influence in pre-sales, the services group, the engineers, the designers. Right? You have some influence in how things are done.
Hmm.
Go out and get trust from those people.
Okay.
And the more trust you get in that sphere of influence, it's going to radiate out, right? You're going to have the opportunities to share insights that those groups may be holding back, and you're going to be able to put it in a context of
Hmm.
your product and your problem, and hopefully the company strategy, uh, the business strategy, the product strategy. If you can put that, all of those insights that those other groups are giving you through the trust that you build into the story of the company, the strategy of the company, right? And you do this in public places, you'll gain more influence. Um, and so, even if you work in a more restrictive place, I think there's an opportunity to build that trust in order to uh, get closer to that idea of empowered, which I think in Marty Kagan land is like, let me just go free and let me be focused on outcomes, and let me be focused on the customer fully, and um, let me design a place where we can fail and fail and fail and fail to get to the right place. Um, yeah, all that's going to be based on trust, and you start to build that slowly through your influence pool.
Very insightful as all the other answers. Again, like I really see how you put things into a unique perspective, and like I totally agree. I don't have anything to say after that. That was said perfectly. um, So, like everything that I've been talking about is about, starting from the very beginning on how to learn about product management, how to teach it, and then how to put your strategy together, work with the stakeholders, and so on. Like this would be very useful on, on the IC level, right? And that's the example that I've been using to ask you. But I want to refer now to one of the articles that pieces that he wrote, the friction, setbacks, and underperformance, the path to product leadership. So now someone is trying to advance in the ladder and get up in the ladder of the product management career, but there are different setbacks, things that are happening here and there, and so on. So like, how do you deal with managing that kind of friction that might happen in your career? How do you handle different setbacks and so on? And like, I've read this article, I have it open right now just to take a second look, but it was very insightful, and I would really like you to like explain, not just reading the text, but like having you explain what you really meant and what the message that you wanted to communicate with writing that in your own voice, because it would be more relatable and easier to connect with, I think.
Got you. The survival metrics article.
Hmm?
Oh, which article?
The friction, setbacks, and underperformance, the path to product leadership. It's on the
Oh,
Mind
the
the
path of,
Product.
yeah. So what I wrote for mind the product.
So like, how could you're trying to transition into more leadership. Now
Yeah.
you've been IC for a couple of years, and you're trying to transition to leadership. And like, I think one or two times I discussed that with other guests. Like, how do you transition to leadership and management roles? And one of the things that we always discussed is what happens, like, you're trying to transition and now you have transitioned at some point. Now you're supposed to do a totally new job, like something like you're still starting from the beginning. You're a fresh grad
Yes.
right now, fresh starter. Everything that you have done so far in your career that got you to the point of starting a leadership position will not work anymore. You need to do other things. Right now, it's you're not the IC right now. You're not actively hands on building the product. Your
Hmm.
product is the team, not the actual
Yes.
product that they are managing. So, um, yeah, like starting from the hurdles of trying to get and grow into a leadership position, and then how you execute on it. Like, what's your take on this?
Yeah. So I think what you said there is completely right. Product leadership is a whole different job than being a product manager. And the problem is no one tells you that. They just
Yeah,
go, here you go. Here's a couple of products that are now in your portfolio, and a couple of product managers, and
go
bye.
figure. Go
Oh,
figure.
no, yeah, go figure. Bye. Good luck. We'll check back in. um, and so the framing is right. Like you're now your product is your team,
Yeah.
and so one of the first things I do whenever I coach product people who have made this transition is the first thing you need to do is rethink who your peers are. So in the world of products, you're kind of like your peers are kind of whatever is the most important thing at the time, who you talk with, yada yada yada. Kind of you know. Anywho, as a
Mhm.
leader, your peers are now all of the functions that are uh, horizontal to you.
Yeah.
So your peer, if you're the director of product, your peer is director of design, your peer is the director of sales, your peer is the director of pre-sales, your peer is director of customer success, right? Those are your peers. Those are the people you need to start building really good relationships with. And so the first reframe is away from the output for what's happening with the customer. The reframe is, and the the peers are kind of this mismatched. Now your peers are very well defined.
Hmm.
And so your job is to build trustworthy relationships. Try to find ways to connect with them one on one if you can, at least once a month.
Hmm.
Uh, my favorite tactic was to just have a set coffee schedule. Right, um, coffee for me. A lot of my product leadership uh, ended up in Europe, so it'd be coffee for me. I don't know, maybe tea,
Yeah.
sometimes coffee with them, right? And you sit and you have a conversation, just a conversation about life, what's happening, what's going on in your world. Um,
Hmm.
and so it becomes really important because you have to go see uh, their perspectives, and it's going to be friction, right? It's going to be friction where sometimes in the icy world it may or may not be friction. For you there, it's going to be friction. You're gonna have to go make choices, and it's better to make choices fully
Yeah.
formed, fully aware. Uh, the other thing is relationships with your direct reports. Uh, super duper important. Do not miss one on ones. One on ones are your lifeblood. One on
Hmm.
ones are what's going to help you understand what's happening with your teams. And so you already have to change your relationship with your calendar, right? All really what I'm talking about changes your relationship with your calendar drastically.
Yeah.
Um, where you're thinking about kind of product reviews and this and that, like you're spending your time in the tactical, practical of your product, that shifts over to relationships.
Hmm.
And you go, where do I put time for that? You also have to make time for those things, but you have to be very particular about when you're going to look and what you're going to jump in on, because that
Yeah.
becomes very secondary. If things are, which goes to the next point, um, your directives have to be much clearer to people. You're connecting them to the outcomes that they're looking for. And so it's not just enough to show up with a completed thing.
Hmm.
The product strategy has to become clear, and that has to become your out. That's your output. That's your text at this point is your product strategy and how it reflects back out to the rest of the organization. And
Hmm.
so it becomes very, very, very important that people can read and understand, hear, see all of that about your product strategy, and it has to come through in their work. And
Hmm.
what you're looking for isn't for things to be completed or even you look for OKRs. They should be a sensor, but like the really important thing is, are things aligned with the strategy, right?
Hmm.
And what are the markers I can see that things are aligned? And you know, some of it's going to be very counterintuitive. For me, one of the things I look for is how many products or projects get canceled. Canceled products to me spell somebody that's following strategy and has a clear understanding of what works and what doesn't.
Hmm.
If things come out all the time, if we got 100% delivery rate for every project that we have, nobody's thinking.
Yeah.
We become a feature factory.
Yeah.
And so, right, as a product leader, things like that are counterintuitive to kind of what you're thinking, right? Like start looking for how are we following through? And then, yeah, your communication, right? If product leader, uh, you're going to be talking and you're going to be talking a lot. That is
Yeah.
your life. Your life is to create air cover and to communicate to the rest of the organization what is going on in product and how
Of
things are
course.
going and all of those things, right? Transparency process. You're there to be the spokesperson for your
Yeah.
team. Um, and the weird thing is nobody's going to tell you when and where to do it,
Yeah.
right? So your job is to go find those communication platforms and start to
Yeah.
advocate your way in, so you can create space for your direct reports, which is also important. You don't want to be the only person talking,
Hmm.
right? You
Of
want to give the
course.
people in your team a space to shine and to talk about the work they're doing because it's going to make them more trusted across the organization.
Of course.
So it's important to go build relationships with people that you probably rarely ever talk to
Hmm.
when you were an IC. Are
Hmm.
you talking to the communications people? If you work in an enterprise, there are communications people. You should know them. You
Yeah.
get to know who they are. The people that write the press releases and all that, you got to make time to go talk to them, right?
Mm.
Because you know they're going to be your gateway out, and they're also going to be they're internal people. They're learning and development people. There are maybe they're internal comms people, right? You got to start getting to know them because you got to start figuring out spaces where you can um, communicate your product strategy. And also, I brought up the learning and development people. You're really responsible for the growth of your team, and so building relationships with that team is inexcusable if you do not know who your learning and development person is. You haven't
Hmm.
even said hi to them on Slack. That's inexcusable
Yeah.
because your team needs to grow. And again, like one of the biggest kind of gaps I see with product leaders in this space is they don't really have a clear understanding of how their product managers are going to grow from where they are to their next step in their career.
Hmm.
And that is also now a part of your job and a serious part of your job. And so getting to know your learning and development people, critical. Same thing
Hmm.
with recruiters too, by the way. That's the other side. The learning and development is growing your people, learning your people, your quote unquote people, your HR people as a whole, extremely important because you're going to want the best recruiters to help you, especially if you're an enterprise. You don't want the best recruiters because I'll tell you now, the bad recruiters are going to be they're going to be a real headache. And if they
Yeah,
don't
of
know you, you're
course.
going to get the bad recruiter.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, you don't want the bad recruiter. It's going to it's going to add a lot of time to your life. So make time to go talk to these people. Make
Of
time to
course.
build relationships to these parts of the organization. Again, places like legal, regulatory, uh, privacy. Your director of privacy, right?
Mm.
You should go talk to them, get to know them, because
Yeah.
it's going to save you time. It's going to save your team time. You become you're the connector, right, for your team, and a lot
Yeah.
of that is through that facilitation that you're going to do through these other parts of the world that you generally, as an IC, don't ever talk to, right? What do they do? I don't know. They do stuff, right? As a leader, now you need to know what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, and also like complementing what you said before that about building trust and so on. But building these, investing in these kinds of relationship, it's the first step of like actually building trust with other people, whether for you as a person or as a leader for your team and so on. Like, if you are not known to the rest of the company, like they would like take dealing with you for the first time with a pinch of salt, and then you will need to work up doing building these trust. But if at least you are connecting with everyone and like you're building these relationships, you're having discussions and understanding their needs and problems from the beginning, it would be much easier to collaborate whenever there is the need to establish such collaborations, right?
Yeah, yeah, like that's you're not you hit something on the head there too, right? It's going to be hard at first.
Yeah.
Nobody knows you, and
Hmm.
everybody on the leadership side is extremely busy.
Yeah, of
Uh, they got a million
course.
things. Like you have a team, and all these things are happening underneath you. They have a team, and all these things are
Yeah.
happening underneath them, right?
Yeah.
And so, until you present yourself as a serious person,
Yeah.
quote unquote serious person, right? You're gonna get kind of pushed to the side a bit, but it's important to continue to show up and then show your value to the other people in the organization. Um, they will be grateful and thankful. And the
Hmm.
other side, your team will be thankful because you're going to be able to tell them context they wouldn't see.
Yeah,
You're going
of
to be able to
course.
see around corners for them.
Of course.
Hey, you're working on that product, such and such. Here are 3 customers that are having this problem over in France.
Yeah.
Right, it's going to affect your worldwide rollout.
Mm.
Um, I'm going to set you up with a customer success manager over there, and you're going to have a conversation with them. Right, it's going to give you some insight.
Yeah.
Um, right, so like you're able to say things like that
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
help your product managers be more effective. Right, and
Yeah.
then they're building trust. And the
Yeah.
idea too, especially over time, what starts to happen is they can start taking on those conversations too, which is
Hmm.
great, right? They know the people they need to talk to, right? Which allows you to move on and focus on other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Spot on. So the final question that I have here, again relating to that article that I referred to, um, before the step of being a leader, and you're still someone that is trying to build, or even after you started in leadership roles, you're always trying to develop your career and so on. But things doesn't always work your way, right? There are definitely setbacks every now and then. Things fail, things don't work, and so on. And I quote you on quoting Rocky Balboa. It's not about you getting knocked down, but it's about how you get up again and hit harder, right? So, like, what would be your advice to deal with career setbacks in product management?
First, breathe, breathe, breathe. You the the thing about leadership is your setbacks are going to be bigger just by design. They're going
Mm,
to be bigger than what you've seen as an IC. Um, and so the first thing that's super important for you to do, and there's going to be, yeah, you also have a million things, something bad happened, but business doesn't stop.
yeah,
And so you can become very overwhelmed very quickly, like hearing something in a meeting, but like, you have the rest of the day to go and do,
yeah,
like, and you can continue like that unless you got to find the time to sit and breathe and detach and kind of
mm,
take things in, do a post-mortem on whatever happened,
mm,
figure out why,
mm,
uh, what happened, why it happened, how it won't happen again, and depending on the setback, publish it publicly,
yeah,
because uh, especially experienced leaders, everyone know everybody fails. It's a part of it. But one thing that differentiates people uh, is if they are honest enough to or if they're confident enough really to say, this is what happened, this is why it happened, this is how it's
yeah,
not going to happen again. So you all know, like, okay, I understand this was a mistake,
yeah,
but we're going to get better,
yeah,
right?
um,
And so
yeah,
getting uh, that postmortem is super duper important, both internally and externally. Um,
yeah,
and the other big thing there is, hopefully you've been building. Uh, once you hit the leadership stage, you probably have some mentors, uh, uh, both what's the word I'm looking for? Like both like internally and then like externally. You have folks that you've worked with in the past, maybe folks that are maybe a couple years ahead of you,
hmm,
old bosses that are they've continued on their careers. You're a
yeah,
director, they're a VP now, or they went
mm,
and founded something, or maybe they're a coach or something, whatever, right? They've been an executive, right?
mm,
And so I'd go and talk to them about feedback, right?
yeah,
Now, if you have a postmortem, now you have a very constructive way to talk about that feedback.
hmm,
Which, if you're going to have an informal coffee with somebody, um, uh, then that really helps. So
hmm,
my example in this case, the example I love to give is, uh, so Chris Butler
yeah,
is, oh, you know of Chris, which uh, Chris is great.
yeah,
Chris is awesome. For folks who don't know
yes,
Chris, um, Chris is he's now at Copilot. He's former Googler, formerly at Meta. But I used to work for Chris, ooh, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Wow, it's starting to
hmm,
feel like forever.
ah, wow,
Wow. Wow. That was a time ago.
yeah,
But so yeah, when I was a younger product person, and we maintained a relationship since I worked for him. Right, he's been somebody that I can go to and talk.
Mm-hmm.
about some of the struggles that I'm having. And so having somebody like that, you can just grab an informal coffee with, or if whenever we're in the same town, we go get a drink, right? And we go talk about what's going on. He also gives me some of the things that are happening in his career. So I get some insight on like what's happening for him. And that gives me some understanding about his path.
Yeah.
And so it becomes important to build those informal relationships, either with old bosses or if you go out, right? Like uh, there are other folks that you meet along the way. Like Melissa Perry functions like that for me too.
Yeah.
Um, whenever I see Melissa, right, we'll sit down, we'll get a coffee, and it's somebody I can talk to, or I can text, and just kind of ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
As she's, a bit further in her career than me right now, and I can learn something from her, get her feedback.
Of course.
Um, so like building those connections, and those both of those people before they became kind of very popular
Mm.
names that folks know, uh, I knew them. I think I met both of them in 2016. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
met Chris in 2015. Um, right, these people that will be kind of bigger and have great careers and move on to do amazing things, they're probably in your network now. Start building those relationships.
Yeah.
Um, and you'll find yourself, if you're in the leadership position, right, you'll find yourself with people to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And again, yeah, especially old bosses. If you have a really good connection with an old boss, that's a connection you want to keep.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
I think the big two is get those postmortems out, and then seek feedback when you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Like I would try to summarize that into whatever setback or failure that happens, embrace it and turn it into a learning opportunity, because that's the only good thing that could come out of it, really. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, on that note, thank you so much, Adam, for being here. Like you've shared so much insights and learnings, and from your experience. Like I personally like really enjoyed this conversation. I didn't feel that we've spent a full hour on this, and yeah, I'm so happy that yeah, like we finally made this happen. We've been trying to like schedule this for a very long time. So yeah, once again, thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you, Omar, for inviting me. This was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, and for our viewers, thank you so much for sticking around and hearing this episode. If you have any feedback or questions, please make sure that you mention them in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Spotify channel, and also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for any new updates. Thank you so much, and stay tuned to the product life.